morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for another webinar edition of Developer Town's Mind Meld. My name is Nate Canada, and I'll be your moderator for our time this morning. We know that there are a lot of Zoom calls and webinars and meetings, so just want to say first and foremost, thank you guys for joining us. We know you could be, enjoying coffee or sleeping in, so thanks for so much for tuning in. Before I hand things over to Derek and Adam, I'm going to give a quick overview of who DT is, what the series is all about, our agenda, and then how to engage during the webinar. So first and foremost, Developer Town. We are an Indianapolis-based software consulting firm that helps our customers solve important problems with technology. We offer services and solutions in a number of areas, including application development, DevOps support, web and mobile development, design, embedded software, and other architecture strategies. And DT Mind Melds are really a once-a-month opportunity for the community to come together to hear about different tech topics and discuss interesting problems to solve. Obviously, we used to do this in person quite a bit, but with the situation, we've moved to the webinar format. So today we are going to be covering design systems that scale. So hearing about the best practices on how to build and maintain your design system. We're going to explore techniques to get started on a solid design foundation, how to better engage your development team around design, and how to get the most out of that design system at scale. So how things kind of work here. After I cover the rest of the basics here and hand things off to the panelists, they're going to give their presentation and we'll have a short Q&A session. Before that, you can download the presentation by navigating to the handout section in the GoToMeeting panel towards the bottom. Also, as your moderator, I'm going to be on standby to make sure the morning flows as smoothly as possible. So if you have a question for me or for any of the presenters, feel free to message me directly in the GoToWebinar app using the question function. And I'll keep my eye out and I'll collect those, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible, either during the presentation or at the end. And if for some reason GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar is being stubborn for you guys, you can always feel free to email me. It's just my ncanada@developertown.com. And I think before we get started here and I introduce our two wonderful panelists, we're going to do two quick polls here just to kind of get an idea of where you guys are at in your experience with design systems. So first and foremost, what is your current role? Curious what your guys' experience and perspective is coming into this. This will also help us understand kind of how to structure the question section at the end. I'm seeing answers rolling in here. Looks like we have a lot of developer-focused folks, which is awesome. You guys, just a few more seconds here. Awesome. All right. So it looks like that about 50% of you are developer or development focused, quarter in the design world, some business folks, and then one or two in the product owner space. So that's awesome, a pretty wide array of people. And then we'll do one more here, which is, do you currently use a design system at work? And I don't know, Derek or Adam, if it would be helpful to kind of quickly maybe give a brief definition of what you would define as a design system.
Yeah, for for the design system, really just any system that you're using, whether it's a legitimate design system that you've intentionally created, or even as a very basic organized colors, typography, and a few basic buttons, maybe just to provide some consistency.
And as an engagement manager, Derek, you're speaking my language with that consistency stuff. All right, I'll give you guys just a few more seconds here. And in full transparency, I added a few fun answers, Derek, so you may be surprised here when I close the poll, share the results here. So I think one or two were told there would be donuts, but it looks like the majority of folks do not use a design system currently at work. About a quarter do. Perfect.
Cool.
That's awesome. Well, this is the right place to be. All right, so I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists here, and we'll go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, we have Mr. Derek Rudd, who's been a senior UX designer at DT for many moons. And before Developer Town, he's worked on large-scale B2B and B2C projects for some fairly recognizable companies. I feel like people know Nike, maybe the NBA, Target, and New Line Cinemas. And Derek specifically enjoys working on complex apps where he can focus really on aligning that design system integration and design process, bringing really all the stakeholders, whether it's product owners, developers, QA, together to create beautiful experiences for their end users. And then we have Mr. Adam Yale, who's a senior product designer here at Developer Town and has been, I think, involved in design for, over 12 years. Adam really loves turning client product visions into engaging user experiences across all platforms and devices. And before coming to Developer Town, Adam's worked and molded user experiences and served as creative director at Gusto and Cha Cha. And fun fact, was a pretty rad concert photographer for Nuvo. So,
oh, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So with that being said, I will do everyone a favor here, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Adam and Derek and let you guys run the show.
Cool. Thanks for the intro, Nate. Good morning, everybody. Like Nate said, my name's Adam Yale, and I just love talking about design. So let's jump into it. I want to start off with a quote today. When technology matures, design moves to the foreground because the underlying machinery has been commoditized. I thought that was a really cool quote, just for the fact that technology has matured this much, and that's the reason that we get to have this talk today, is because now all the focus now is on design thinking and moving forward. So pretty excited about that. So what is a design system? Good question. It is a collection of reusable components guided by clear standards that can be assembled together to build any number of applications. It's a language that is shared between designers and engineers. It's the single source of truth for which groups all the elements that will allow the design team to realize or develop a product. And it offers a library of visual style, components, and other patterns that are documented by the design team, so that building products can be more efficient and more cohesive. So let's look at some real world examples of design systems. They've been around forever. This is nothing new. So the first one we'll look at is Legos. Legos have been around forever. You might even be able to argue that it's the most successful design system out there. You can build anything from Star Wars to Cowboys to Friend's Coffee Shop to Harry Potter. But every one of those customizations has an underlying design language that they all share. The other one that people are probably pretty familiar with is Taco Bell. So Taco Bell's got 8 ingredients, but they've got 52 menu items. So talk about clearly implemented design thinking. And that's allowed them to come up with other world-changing ideas like Kit Kat quesadillas and Cool Ranch Dorito tacos. But let's take a look at our software examples. So what I'm showing here is kind of a breakdown of atomic design that you'd use in your design system. This was coined by a designer named Brad Frost a couple years back. So it starts with your atoms. So you've got text styles, colors, icons, shadows, borders. You can combine those atoms into molecules like buttons, input boxes, search boxes, and menus. So like a button, for example, is made up of text styles, colors, and shape atoms. You could then take those molecules, take that button example, and move that into organisms. So you can group those buttons together to create a nav bar or other things. You could do rating, widgets, cards, things like that. When you group your organisms together, those start to become a template and create the skeleton of the page or a modal. And then once you start injecting live data into those templates, you get some real pages. So another way of looking at this is a fully mature design system. You can see that if you've got your UI kit and you've got your behavior and scale rules, grids, layout, standards, you've got guidelines, right? And then adding in code there, once you've got your design system set up on the design tool side, once you've got your code set up and maybe something like Storybook, then you've got a full library. And then adding your own brand, icons, logos, styles to that creates an entire mature design system. So let's take a look at another one of Brad Frost's example. This is the Instagram app, the old school version. But he breaks this down. So in the atoms, you've got colors, icons, text styles, shapes, and placeholders. Then you combine those molecules in your header up here. The header's got colors, shapes, text that comes together. Any two atoms come together to make a molecule, right? Then you get your title bar, again, shapes, text styles, colors. These all create your individual molecules. Once you put those together, you see in the middle here, we've got an organism, right? So your title bar, shapes, text, colors again, placeholder, action bar, comments, and then our buttons came together for a nav bar. Those organisms all come together, create one template, and then once you get that live data in there, you've got yourself an actual page. So what makes up a design system? If you break it down, you get your visual language. You get color, typography styles, icons, motion styles, and photography. You've got UI elements, your buttons, like your primaries and secondaries, hover states for those buttons, form controls, like text areas, radio buttons, and checkboxes. UI components, so things like navigation, cards, tables, modals, sidebars, things like that. UI patterns, so this would be a combination of pages or modals for authentication, creating an account, form structures. If it's a shopping site, you'd have purchasing and checkout patterns. And then last but not least, your own branding, your identity, logos, your taglines, themes, and partnerships.
All right, so let's look at why design systems matter. So we've looked at what makes up the design system. The first thing is it creates better, more consistent communication with your entire product team. So this goes from everybody from the product owner to all the way through QA. If everybody is informed and engaged in the design system, it basically answers a lot of the questions that other areas of the product team may have. It allows the designer to spend less time on UI pixel pushing and allows them to focus on the actual UX of the product. And then the last thing is it helps avoid design debt, which is something that a lot of people talk about development debt. There's also a thing called design debt. Design should be an asset, not a debt. Design debt is a result of an accumulation of single-use and inconsistent assets that become impossible to categorize or maintain. As they become more difficult to use and access, teams start their own collections. That's the start of duplication and version control issues, and that's design debt.
So let's take a look at an example of design debt. If you're familiar with the Winchester house. So the widow that inherited the Winchester fortune thought that every person that was shot by a Winchester gun was a ghost that was trying to chase her around the house. So she kept building more and more rooms and staircases to nowhere and doors to nowhere and everything else. So this is a great example and a cautionary tale. Don't be like the widow Winchester that built more and more one-off components to keep away from the feature creep ghosts and the design debt demons. Big brands that use design systems. So all the large companies, Facebook, Twitter, Airbnb, mid-sized companies are picking it up, and even startups are starting right away with it. Let's see, here's a list of a lot of people are using it. You can see all the majors in there. Google really kicked off the first public design system in 2014 with material design, and since then everyone else has started releasing their own. I would like to point out that you can start to see on the bottom row here, we've got governments starting to create their own design systems. So that's something to keep an eye out for with government contracts and projects going forward.
All right, so what makes design systems at scale different from average design systems? So as products scale and get larger and larger, it is more important to stay true to the design system. And what I mean by that is that you really want to have your design team using the single source of truth to design those new views. So especially when it comes to views that are going to be final production ready views. Adam touched on the inconsistencies earlier, and if your design team is focused on using the design system, you're going to have less issues. The other thing is obviously at scale, you're going to have more typography. You're going to have more variance there. You're going to have probably more color selections as well. Maybe you're going to have a color set for an admin side of the application, or a more public side of the application might be a different color set. And then there's just more elements in generally to manage. Because there's more assets to manage, the need for flexible component creation is really important. And the reason for that is that it allows us to manage fewer elements in the design system, but get the most power and efficiency out of them. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And really, organization is key here. I find that in my experience, the more organized the design system is, the quicker it is to find assets, and just in general, it's easier to use and to scale. Okay, so how do we get started? So there's two different ways that you can approach this, and it really depends on the product that you're working on. So if your product is already in the wild or is already in development, then the first step is to analyze and audit that product. The things that we're looking for here is we're looking for colors, typography, buttons, and other common UI elements that are already inside the application, and that will once you identify those, that helps to start the design system. The next thing that you're going to want to do is I like to create a plan with some loose rules as guidance. And what I generally do is I get the entire group together, the entire product team together, and just talk about not just where the product is, but also where it's going to go. And the loose rules, those really, what we're talking about there is we're looking to segment and really find out exactly, like, create section containers for your design system. So I might have a color palette page in the design system. I might have typography, of course, buttons, maybe navigation, those general pages, and I'll stub those in to know that those are areas that are going to be fleshed out and going to grow over time. Again, I mentioned starting with colors and typography. Those are things that pretty much every product has, and that's just a really easy thing to start with. And then when you're creating your plan, don't forget to include testing and QA. On the development side of things, their work gets QA'd and tested pretty extensively, hopefully. But we as designers, we also need to be testing and QAing our own work. So what I mean by that is, as we are creating new components, we want to test those while we're building those components, and that's just going to save us time in the future. So what I like to do, let's say I'm designing a new navigation system. I want to make sure that navigation system works on mobile, tablet, and desktop, if that's what my project entails. And you can do that simply by just creating an instant and then just resizing it around, making sure that the padding is the same, that it scales appropriately, nothing stretches. If you're testing and QAing your design system in process, you're just going to find that you're able to build views, you're able to design views much quicker, creating an environment where you're able to turn work pretty quickly.
Hey, Derek, quick question for you from our attendees here. So talking around getting started and pulling inspiration and assets from other sources, do you have any thoughts on if it's okay to use already existing icons for your design systems? And does that pose any sort of copyright threat?
Sure. Hey, that's a really great question. So I'm going to touch on a little bit more of that later in the presentation, but as long as it really depends on the project. I think it's absolutely fine to use other icons. Of course, if it's not a free icon set and you need to pay for the licensing fee, most like Font Awesome and different icon sets, they charge. But in the long term, when you're looking at the sheer size of the icon libraries, it's going to save time. So I advocate it. My current project, we use material icons. Those work out really well. There's several different sets of those icons, whether they're just outline or filled or duotone. There's a lot of opportunity there. Good question. I hope that answered it.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, so when we're starting our design system, who should be involved when creating the design system? In the traditional sense, designers would just go away into a closet and create the start of a project. With design systems at scale, there's a lot more planning that needs to happen up front. So what I like to do is I like to get the product owners, the designers, developers, QA, and account managers or engagement managers, all bring everybody to the table and just have a talk about why we're going to do a design system and what the benefits are going to be, and what our plan is, and how each of the different areas are going to interact with the design system. What we find is if you bring everybody to the table up front, you create an atmosphere of collaboration, right? So if we can get everybody to buy in that the design system is our single source of truth, there's never going to be questions about, hey, what actual hex color is this primary call to action going to be? QA is going to love it because they also have that single source of truth as they're doing their work, and it really just helps. It helps answer a lot of questions, but at the same time, it creates a lot of conversation around the design system.
Right. Yeah, working in silos with minimum outside feedback is allow you to make progress more quickly, but it means you'll have to work harder to encourage other teams to adopt a design system. So case in point, the old school way where designers would, go away, spend a lot of time making a perfect design, and then handing over to development. When you're not on the same page and not working together in that old school process, you get something that looks more like this. Design team designed Keanu Reeves, but then development. When it came out, it looked more like Adam Driver. It's close, but not quite the same. So a design system helps everybody get on the same page, and then we'll decide if we're watching The Matrix or Star Wars together.
All right. So here's a slide with a design system that has some basic colors and some typography from an enterprise design system. You'll see that there's color swatches with different personas like staff, public, and support. We have our global colors, we have status colors, we have different product colors. On the typography side, you see that it's a lot, right? It's a lot to manage. And that is one of the primary cases for the design system. In a smaller design system, you know, I generally will I will label my my typography styles much like development does. I like to work really closely with them so that as they look at my designs, they know exactly what text styles to implement. When you're dealing with products at scale, though, there's just a lot more opportunity and a lot more options as far as textiles and need for the textiles to be different. And the reason that you'll see them named not as H1 through H5 or paragraph or labels is that I want to have flexibility in when I do change a specific textile. So if I was using the same card title, let's say that was an H3. If I'm using the same card title typography, I am in a report as I am on a dashboard, I want to be able to update those independently. It gives me more flexibility, and it provides opportunity to grow down the road. The other thing that you'll notice here is my naming, the naming of the textiles. So you'll see, you know, card / title / number / small, and then or / medium or / large. That's just a way for me to keep things organized. And it helps me frame what components could potentially in the future be combined into a single element that's that we can apply some overrides. You know, whether you're working in Sketch, Figma, XD, that they all treat the components a little bit differently. So you'll need to research how your design weapon of choice utilizes the components. But I find naming to be very, very important in design systems at scale. You'll also notice that in some of the textiles, I'll actually put a number at the end, and that's just the font size. So I can quickly go back and I know that I'm looking for a card title or a card number that is, you know, in the realm of 42 or 48. So I can go and easily find those. So I'll name them very specifically to what they actually are. So let's grow it at scale. So if you're dealing with a product that is that you're just starting on, it's important to start with a separate file for your design system. And the reason for this is that you can invite other design members. You can invite the product team to the design system, and you can actually, if you're working with a design team, everybody can be contributing to the design system and constantly updating it. Our favorite design tool at Developer Town is Figma right now. And what it allows us to do is we can have multiple designers on a single project, really knocking out a design system, a pretty large design system, in a very rapid amount of time. So we like to keep that separate, so that way we're not stepping over anyone else's work. If each one of the designers is using the external design system as their source of truth, we can all be working in the exact same file, or 10 different files, and it doesn't matter. And if somebody is updating the design system, all of those updates get pushed to the individual designers, and then in Figma you can accept or reject those changes. So that's really nice.
Hey Derek, got a kind of a question around that, which I think you're kind of talking about right now, which is when you're creating a design system, do you need to write down, all the pixel specs, document them somewhere, like the size, margins, padding for, say, like a search bar?
Yeah, I mean, that is really, so it depends on your developer handoff tool. So if you're using something like Figma or Zeppelin or Envision Inspect, then those systems do provide that. I find it really nice to use a grid system and make sure everybody buys in on the grid system. So I prefer the 8-pixel grid. It makes things really simple. There's a ton of articles out there on pros and cons of it. But what it really does is it helps eliminate the question of how many pixels it is. How many pixels and padding or margin are on each element. If you're using a grid system, it really answers a lot of those questions. If the person is asking about if they make notes for their own use as far as building out the design system, I absolutely do that. I've got notebooks of diagrams with padding and margins, and all of those look like architect drawings. It's ridiculous and kind of embarrassing. So does that answer the question?
I think it does. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. The next thing I want to touch on is design systems are a buzzword. Just like any buzzword, resources start popping up, which is awesome. It's really inspiring. If you did a search for download design system right after this, you're going to find hundreds, if not thousands, of downloadable design systems. That's fantastic. The problem is you didn't create them. There are a lot of really great free and paid design systems out there. We've dabbled with UX Power Tools. With Set Product has a lot of really nice Figma design systems. The issue with that, though, is once you start using that design system, since you didn't actually create it, it's very hard. A lot of these design systems are very hard to understand how to update. So what ends up happening is the designer will start laying out views and then find out, oh, I need to modify this search bar. And it's really difficult to update those because you didn't create them. So you start detaching symbols. And when you do that, symbols are components. So when you start doing that, your design system is now disparate from your actual design views. And so what I recommend to everyone, especially 100% without a doubt, is when you're dealing with products at scale, to start from scratch. Just start from scratch, building out your, like I mentioned earlier, the typography, the color sets. I would even do buttons just up front. There's a lot of YouTube tutorials. That's how I started dabbling in this. Just watching hours and hours of people creating components and various tricks with the design tools. As far as once we get it started, we're laying out our brand, our buttons, maybe some very basic card elements. I like to build my design system in progress. So I don't like the idea of just upfront thinking that we're all clairvoyant enough to actually lay out all of the elements you're going to need to design your views for your product. So what I like to do is we'll get a start, and then as we're creating views, we are identifying different components that we want to bring into our design system. And at that point, we pick those components up, bring them into our external file, and we'll create components out of them. Of course, we'll test them, make sure that they're good to go, and then we'll push them out. Then what ends up happening is that your design can continue to happen at a very rapid pace. When you're dealing with early product work, things need to move fast. So as we bring components over and build our design system out in process, we're not taking a month up front to just generate all of our design assets that we're going to use. This approach allows flexibility, and in my opinion and my experience, it just works out a lot better. I touched on the naming earlier in the typography slide. It's here again. Using naming for maximum power. This goes from everything from your artboard names to in your design system to your buttons. It just if you name them if you name your components and your elements and your artboards for that matter in a very strategic way, it allows for more dynamic power down the road. And what I mean by that is there's a project that I worked on a while ago, and it was a pretty large project. Had 5 or 6 public-facing modules, and had a lot of different elements. And as a result, there were 5 different navigation, and each one of those modules had anywhere from 5 to 10 navigation elements inside of them. So you can see that that's roughly, what, 50 or so, probably 40 to 50 different navigation elements. Well, I thought I was being slick, and I had created basically components for each one of those nav items. So we never had to utilize anything outside of the design system, but I had 50 navigation items. It was really great for updating. It was really fast. I could add elements in and out of the navigation, at the drop of a hat. It was awesome. And as we learned more, the power of naming allowed us to convert all 50 of those symbols into a single component. And that is where the power is, because then by basically bringing them into a single component, we're able to manage all of the navigation for the entire product inside a single component. Adam liked I used to have a design system artboard that had all 50 of those navigations. And I laid them all out, and it looked awesome and pretty impressive.
It was amazing.
But at the end of the day, we found a much better way. And the reason we found that is just by building design systems in process. If I would have just stuck with building everything up front, we would have never found that.
Yep.
Okay, so here's a couple more screens from a design system. This is just showing what a mature design system looks like when you're dealing with form inputs and grids. You'll see that all of these form inputs, those text elements right there, they're all derived from a single element, an atom. And like Adam was mentioning earlier, talking about the atomic design principles, we have inputs with icons here, we have the typography, but what you're seeing on the left and the right side of things, they're different personas, and they're differentiated by colors, right? Those are not separate instances of components. Those are actually all the same components. They're just we're just leveraging the components in the design system to differentiate the persona that they belong to. Another thing that's a common thing in our office that our design team talks about quite a bit is grids. Component grids are difficult, but if you spend the time and really understand how to build these grids correctly, it will save you a ton of time in a product that is data heavy. My current project that I'm working on is very, very data heavy, and I found ways. We initially found some articles talking about this concept of single cell grids, and that really is based around a single cell that is created by columns, and then you can build dynamic grids, so you can resize the columns and those type of things. It reduces probably 10 or more fold the design time it takes to generate grids. And the reason that it's important to create grids as components is that we just reuse them so often. They need to be flexible. You need to be able to include buttons or icons inside them, be able to resize the columns. And so I wanted to show this because this is an example of a component that is both a cell-based grid that is column that is set up with columns. We also have a version that is row-based. So that's really handy when you're populating data. Sometimes you might have, in this case, it's showing a paginator. In some cases, there might be only two or three records in a grid, and you need to be able to pop in and out data. So just adding the flexibility and just showing off a little bit of some mature design principles here.
So how to get the dev team involved? I've always found success with a grassroots approach. So find the influencers, get buy-in with them by helping them save time, and they have fewer questions. Work with them rather than dictating. So I love trying out new tools, and I'm always looking for the newest ones. Back when Zeppelin came out, I was excited about that and kind of proclaim this new tool to everybody and tell the dev team, and that kind of goes nowhere when you tell everybody that there's an awesome new tool that's going to change our life. So I found more success if you just worked with one developer on my team, and we got on the same page with it. It made our lives easier, and he kind of took it back to the hive and as patient zero and let everybody else know. So find the influencer and help them get on board. Another note besides this, I know that we have a lot of people on the development side in the audience today, and we've talked a lot about the design side of this process. But Derek and I have always talked about this. We're pretty excited about there's a future that's not too far away. And there's tools that are promising this, where on the design side, we can build out these components. We have a little bit more control of how they look and feel. And we can put these into some tools that are coming out that are promising to then allow development to grab these components that we built and spit them out in whatever flavor you're working with, whether it's React or Vue or Angular. And we're excited about that because that lets us as designers do more of what we do best, and that lets developers do more of what they do best. And we think we work together better that way.
All right, so we all know projects move fast. So the big question is, how do I keep my design system updated? So I touched on it a little bit earlier, but really, what the thing that I think is most important is just don't fall behind. Only design from your design system. And one of the ways that I think you know, I keep things a little bit more organized is because I don't ever create views that are not derived directly from the design system. And I mean final production views, right? There's other designs where I'm exploring. I don't feel that it's necessary to create components, nor would I want to muddy up the design system with exploratory elements or anything like that. So I'll have a separate sandbox that I play in that I utilize the design system to be able to build rapidly, but I'm not creating components for experimental work. But for work that is final production views, absolutely making sure that the design system is completely in sync and built, and the views are built directly with the design system. So when you look at my views, you'll notice that you'll never see any hex colors. The hex colors are all derived from the design system. The same thing with any element. I try to make sure that you know, the closer that I work with the design system, obviously it stays updated because I'm constantly trying to push the limits, and I'm trying to integrate new assets that are used and new UI constructs. But I find that very effective, and that's just something that I put on myself, and it's not something for everyone. But I find it just is it's a fail safe for me to make sure that the design system is always up to date. The other reason for that is anytime QA has a question, if you have any disparities in the design system, it's gonna cause them to question the accuracy and the validity of the design system. That's the last thing we want. We want QA to have a single source of truth. The same thing with the development. And as long as everything is updated and consistent with your final views, then you're good to go. So I make a rule. So I covered that. Yeah, so what happens if you don't update the design system? So what you end up having is you just basically are creating a ton more work for you in the future, not just the confusion of what the actual button color is or whatever the question is. You're just creating a lot more work because it's a lot harder to go back after the fact. And let's be real, we always say, oh, we'll circle back later. There is no later because we're constantly pushing. We're constantly designing new views.
Right.
Thanks, Adam, for hopping back.
If you don't update your design system, then you're putting all that design debt on your credit card, and that's got a high interest rate on it that you're going to have to pay later. How to determine what components to create. So the basic rule is anything that you use more than twice, that gets componentized. If you're in Figma or if you're in Sketch, it's symbolized. The other way you'll know is feedback from user testing. For example, so if you did a test and you found that your cards outperform modals when displaying data, then you know that you need to focus more on card layout, card components. If you did a navigation test and found that your sidebar provided more affordability than your top navigation bar, then you know that's going to tell you which way to go. Focus on the sidebars.
All right. So in summary, the larger your project is, the more important it is to have a well-organized design system. I hope we've kind of explained today, this morning, a little bit about why that is, and maybe shown some use cases there. Create a plan and involve the entire project team. This is so important. It makes sure that everybody is speaking the exact same language. You know, I know that we covered it before, but this is another one that I think is just really important. I found that the more buy-in I've had, the better luck I've had, and it's great. Grow the design system as you design new views, and keep the design system updated to avoid design debt, that high interest rate.
That's right.
Awesome. So I've got some questions for you guys. Lots of great questions coming in from the audience here. So first for you guys, is there a tool that can help make UI components or typography reusable across different projects?
Yeah. You want to take that one, Derek?
Repeat. Yeah, go ahead. So I think if I'm understanding it right, across different projects. So if you're using a design system and you have your typography set up, you can link your design system to really any design file you want, and that's Sketch and Figma. XD is very similar how they work with that. So as far as the design of things, that's a very simple thing to accommodate, as long as you're using the same design tool for both products. You agree with that, Adam?
Exactly. Yep.
Do you guys have any guidance on how to manage responsive text sizes within the system? Do you guys create different sizes within the system? Example, you know, on 1 rem on mobile, 1.5 rem on desktop, etc.
Ooh, I love this question. Can I take this one, Adam?
Oh, I know you do. You're all over it.
We talk about this quite a bit. So there are some algorithms that you can run that actually generate those font sizes. I can post a link after this for everybody to check out. But it's really cool. It's, you know, there's a lot of different settings, like perfect fourths, the golden ratio. There's a lot of different algorithms that you basically plug in your baseline, and it gives you all of your font sizes that you're going to need. And that's something that I implement in almost every single one of my projects. And so that basically handles mobile, tablet, and desktop, and the different scalings. It's really awesome, and it's something that I nerd out about way too much.
Yeah, that's probably not possible in Figma right now, but I'm just thinking about that world in the future where we have a tool like modules or interplay, where we're designing the components that are going to be exported in a language. They probably have more viewport controls to change the typography size within tools like that, but we kind of manually do it in our viewport layouts in Figma right now.
Yeah, it's exciting that those future products, those are incredibly fascinating.
I know, I can't wait.
That's actually a perfect segue into the next question. So you guys have mentioned a few times now, there's some tools coming out that you're excited about. Yeah, what are they? What are those tools that you guys are seeing coming out here that you use?
Really, it's those tools. It's the final piece of the bridge to connect design and development, right? So we've had hybrids so far. I think Zeppelin was a great one, and now Figma has the built-in specs. But going forward, there's a couple. Like right now, there's Storyboard, which we've tested out a little bit, and we've had some positive results. That'll allow you to drop in basically frames from Figma of your components and put those side by side with the actual development component, and creates a library to work from. So that's a good hybrid right now. But beyond that, there's a couple out there. There's one called Modules. I think there's one called Interplay that'll actually import our design files or let us design within there and build out components. And then at that point, developers can just grab those components off the shelf and drop them in the page and create the pages. I think that lets designers have more control. It lets us work faster and better, and it lets developers do what they do best as well. So I'm excited about that future world.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's really engaging for me as well. I'm looking forward to those tools, like you mentioned, Interplay and modules, specifically as the promise of connecting design with the development Git repo or whatever version control they're using. I find that really engaging, because then it takes the weight off the development team and really the QA team to some degree, in making sure that the component is built correctly, it's responsive, it works the way that the design team intended. I think that's really engaging, and I would love a world where our design system is directly tied to the actual code. That way, it's just creates way more consistency.
Yep.
Awesome.
More Keanu Reeves, less Adam Drivers.
I personally love Adam Driver, so that makes me sad. What does a design system look like on the code side? Is it a separate repo, a storybook?
Yeah, that really depends on the tools at play here. So it can the design system is right now, it's separate from the actual development files. You can use Figma and their version controlling and their project management. That works out really well. You can use Abstract. I used that for the past 2 or 3 years, and that was phenomenal. That's Abstract is a design tool that basically, if you think of it, it's like Git for design files. So version control, checking in, checking out, all of those type of things. That's really powerful and has saved me more than a few times. Right now they are separate though. So the design system would live primarily inside of the design tool, whether that's Sketch or Figma. As far as I'm aware, anyway. That's how I do it.
There's some other tools out there that have interesting features, like they'll take your designed page layout and do like a transparent overlay on top of the actual development screen, so you can compare and look for inconsistencies that way. So I imagine there's gonna be a lot more tools like that coming out as well.
Yeah, I agree. There's even I've seen browser plugins that do the same thing, that hook directly up to your files. It's nice. Yep.
Another question here for you guys. So there's, iOS light mode, dark mode, Android light mode, dark mode, web, wearables. With so many platforms, do you manage them all out of the same system, or how do you guys organize?
So for me, that really depends on the project. Light mode and dark mode, that's the perfect scenario. That's a perfect example for a design system. All it is a flip of a switch, and you're gonna be able to invert those colors. That's the difference between the color swatches, right? So that's very easy. As far as I've never really had a project that deals with most of my projects. They contain elements that might be mobile, tablet, and desktop, right? I haven't done a whole lot of wearable work, but it would all be in the same system. I wouldn't have disparate design systems for different applications. I think it all could live in the same design system. Yeah, that's just my take.
Mm-hmm.
How do you implement WCAG-A or WCAG-AA standards for accessibility in your design systems?
Ooh, this is good. Good question.
Yeah, that's a big one that's coming up more and more. So our tool of choice is Figma, and there's a lot of great plugins and add-ons that drop into Figma. So we've got some checkers that will actually grade our designs and tell us how close we are to like AA or AAA accessibility ratings. And that depends on the project too. I've had some where that was a requirement, and then I was just curious about, any other products out there or websites that most people go to. And a lot of consumer-facing sites don't even meet those requirements. But if you look at the government side, a lot more of those sites do. So I think that depends on the project, but definitely something to keep an eye out for. And yeah, the answer is there's just great tools and plugins for whatever design tool you're using that helps you check against those ratings.
Yeah, we have like Adam mentioned, there's a lot of different ways that you can go around this. I was actually just listening to a podcast that dealt with this issue. There was a whole segment of businesses that there's I didn't even know this was a thing, but I guess there's ACA trolls, basically like law firms that's all they do is sue websites.
Right.
It's crazy, completely insane. But there's ways that we can prevent that, right? And it's running everything through Stark. Running everything through the different Figma and Sketch plugins, making sure that we have compliance, and most importantly, making sure that you have, as designers, you have a resource to go and ask those questions. I'm not a lawyer. There's definitely guidelines that I think we all should be reviewing pretty frequently, and just making sure that we're staying on top of what we need to accommodate for. But if we have a design expert in house that he kind of focuses on that accessibility. So whenever we have questions, he would definitely be the person that I would go to first.
Mm-hmm. Here's the other side of that issue. If you go into persona and psychology of your user, if you're a person that has color impairment issues, then you have already implemented a tool in your browser that changes the accessibility ratings for you. So I'm not sure where this one's going to go. I know we're forcing it on everybody, but people that have that problem already have tools themselves that fix their own websites. So we'll see where that goes in the future.
Got it. Are there tools for developers to share components across applications or different projects?
Storybook is the one that comes to mind right now.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
So modules and AirPlay, those tools we talked about earlier, those will also do similar things as Storybook, where it creates a catalog of your components. Yeah, I would look at Storybook right now and see what they're doing.
And what would you say you should keep in mind as a beginner when evaluating or considering a design tool for your project?
Ooh, so I think it's really just I wouldn't get too hung up on tools. I used to be a huge fanboy. It was kind of like the running joke of our team. I used to be a really big Illustrator fan way back in the day. I wouldn't get so caught up on the actual tools. Really, I would put a list together of the things that you're trying to accomplish. If the designer is a UX designer or UI designer, I would list out a lot of the tasks that you're going to be doing. Look for, basically create a checklist of yourself for yourself, and then just start going and trying out the tools, right? So one of the things that Adam and I are pretty are pretty interested in is just evaluating new tools. We're constantly finding new things, and so much so that we'll try new tools and then forget that we tried those tools and try them again in a couple of years.
Right.
So I would just start exploring. Find a tool that you're comfortable with. Find a tool that fits all of your needs. There's no right or wrong answer. Figma is not the perfect tool. Sketch is not the perfect tool. XD is not the perfect tool. And with that said, there's probably 30 different UI interface tools that you could be using. There's some big players that offer some really, really great features. I would say just start playing around with that. And I would encourage young designers to, as they're evaluating those tools, hop on YouTube and look at the Pablo Stanley stuff. Look at Sketch Together. I would look at the Figma tutorials. I would look at the XD tutorials. I would just see because when you're starting out a new tool, I remember the first time I opened Photoshop, it's pretty overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff there. I mean, that's been like 20 years ago or something. But it was very overwhelming. So I would look to YouTube to really try to harness the power of the tools, and then find what feels good to you, and just use that. It's okay. There's no right or wrong answer.
That's awesome. Perfect. Well, gentlemen, I think that is it. Double check here. Oh, I lied to you. I've got one more, but I think it's more of a holistic design question, and not essentially one specifically about a design system. But someone commented, could you maybe talk or explain a little bit more about the importance about having different designs for different personas?
Well, that's just a really common UI construct, right? So one of the things that that I like to do is, if a persona, like, and what I mean by that is, if you have a staff admin that is in the back end of a system, I would want the color palette to look a little bit different than what the public facing customer would see, versus a support person. They might see a different color palette, and that's just a great way to visualize where the user is in the application. And the reason for that is I've worked on a lot of systems that deal with impersonating. So a support person might impersonate a public facing customer, and it's just really important to keep those to differentiate those with color. It's just something that I like to do, and that is, honestly a pretty common way to handle that UI construct.
Yeah, I'm working on a project that deals with that right now. So I've got a mobile app with data cards about their system they're managing. But in this app, I've got multiple personas that are going to be using it that have different needs, right? So there's a director, there's managers, and then there's technicians. And based on that persona, they want to see a different order of cards. So I've put a feature in there that actually allows them to customize that card order based on the persona. So it's just a matter of getting a really good persona up front, finding their pain points and needs, and then making sure that those designs that you have are flexible enough to meet either the multiple personas needs or individuals.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for the presentation and answering all the questions here. And yeah, thank you so much for to our attendees for joining us this morning. I know there's a lot of things going on, and so we're really appreciative that you decided to spend the start of your day with us. What we'll do next here is I'll go ahead, once this is all wrapped up, you guys will get a copy of the handout, the recording, and Derek, it looks like your algorithm for responsiveness is in high demand here.
Cool.
So we'll package up all of that stuff and send it out to all the folks here.